Deputy Director of the USDA Rural Development, Terri Billups, Assistant District Director at Economic Development, Los Angeles District Office for the SBA, and Marina DeWit, Region 9 Advocate, U.S. Small Business Administration, Office of Advocacy. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Helene Schneider. I'm with the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, and I believe, Desiree, last night you asked me to help moderate this, right? That's why I'm up here. But why don't we, and just for some housekeeping, are we going to still try to stay to 1 hour or try to cut it short?
No, you can go for the hour.
Go for the hour, okay. But yes, absolutely. So without further ado, we're going to bring up our first speaker, Saul. Come on.
I'm going to try to stay for the hour. So I've been with the FDIC for 30 years, and I'm really going to cover 2 points today with you. I'd like to talk about what all the OMLEs are doing and how women businesses can contract with the federal government, specifically with the OMLEs and specifically in your area. So I just wanted to let you know that I currently work for a woman who's the chair of the FDIC. She's our 3rd woman chair. And I work for a woman who's our chief operating officer, and she's our 1st woman COO. I'm one of 8 OMLE directors. I'm the only male OMLE director, so like today, I'm adding some diversity to the conversation. So there's 8 federal government agencies in the financial area that have offices of minority and women inclusion. They were created roughly 10 years ago under the Dodd-Frank Act. And one of the things that Desiree wanted me to talk to you about very briefly is what the 8 agencies are doing, not just the FDIC. So I just wanted to touch on 3 things that I thought you'd find of interest that the 8 OMLE agencies are doing over the last year. I do have a 1-page handout that each of you has in your package. They identify the 8 OMLE agencies, and I think that is important for women businesses who want to contact these different agencies to do business with them. So the 3 things I just wanted to touch on that I thought would be important for you to know about the OMLEs over the last year. We each do a 342 report to Congress. So it's on our external website, for example, fdic.gov. Why the 342 report would be important for you to glance at for any of these agencies, because it focuses on both workforce diversity and women and minority business contracting for these agencies. So for example, FDIC tracks very carefully women in the workforce at all grade levels, especially focusing on the higher grade levels and the executive level. So all the agencies are out there, and they also can be tracked for their minority and women-owned business contracting. For example, FDIC does roughly 20% of contracting with women and minority businesses, and we also reach out to veteran-owned businesses as well. The second thing I wanted to mention in terms of what the OMLEs are doing are technical assistance events. So this is important for women and minority businesses that want to find out on how to do business with the federal government. So every year we do 1 technical assistance event jointly. We have an event in Washington, D.C. this December. It will be on the websites of all these agencies, including the FDIC. It will be in Arlington, Virginia. There's no cost, and women-owned businesses can come without cost and learn how to do contracting with the federal government, not just the FDIC, not just the OMLE agencies. Then the third thing I was going to mention in terms of what the OMLEs are doing deals with our tracking of the financial industry, and I heard a little bit about this over the last day and a half. So we reach out, each of the OMLEs, to the regulated entities. For example, the FDIC regulates banks, and we send them a survey that tracks their workforce diversity, and you heard there's definitely challenges in that area, and we also track how much minority and women-owned business contracting they're doing. We've done that for 3 years. The bottom line would be the banks and all these other regulated entities are much better in their workforce diversity efforts. Their efforts on contracting with minority and women-owned businesses has a lot to be desired. Unfortunately, that legislation is voluntary. We cannot require banks or the credit unions, for example, regulated by the NCUA to respond. We get about a 20% response rate. We do all types of things to get responses. I did a little video this year. It got a lot of hits, but not a lot of responses. So because of the financial burden on these agencies, we can't force them to respond. The analysis that we did from those responses are also on our external website, fdic.gov. And then I'm just going to very briefly, before I turn over the mic, just talk about how women-owned businesses can do contracting with the FDIC. For example, in your area, the real estate services area, so the FDIC and these agencies like the FDIC, we don't do all types of contracting, but for example, we do real estate service contracting in a broad spectrum of areas, including auctions, appraisals, marketing and sales, environmental due diligence, and site assessment, for example. So women-owned businesses in the real estate field can certainly look to contract with the FDIC as an example. And the FDIC and these other agencies are not generally bound by much of the government regulation. For example, the FDIC is not bound by the federal acquisition regulations. Some of the only agencies are, and some aren't. But the beginning step is to get onto our contractor resource list. So if you go to fdic.gov, there's extensive helpful materials so that women-owned businesses can learn how to contract with the FDIC, and it lists individuals who are on my staff. I have a staff of just under 30 individuals, and certainly one of our missions is to be proponents for women-owned business contracting, as well as increasing workforce diversity of women at the FDIC. And by getting on that contractor resource list, you'll find out about those contracting opportunities. So with that, I'd like to turn over the mic, and at the end, I hope I'll be there for questions.
Great. We'll just move right along, and I'm going to go down, and I'll go last on my stuff, I think. But Michelle Corridon is the Deputy Director of the USDA Rural Development, and welcome, and thank you for being here.
Hi. Okay. It does work. Excellent. So Desiree, thanks for having us back for a second year. We really appreciate it. I want to spread the word about everything that we're doing at USDA to improve the economic and quality of life in rural America. So for those of you who don't know about what we do in the mission area called Rural Development, we have 3 agencies. We have the Rural Business Service, and there are 15 plus programs under the Rural Business Service for loans, loan guarantees, and grants to create or expand business in a rural area. And generally that's to find a community of 50,000 or less in the rural business space. We also have the Rural Utility Service, and there's 20 plus programs, the same, loans, loan guarantees, and grants that are available for rural communities to do water and wastewater treatment, trash collection, and a very big focus on providing broadband in rural America. The Rural Housing Service, where I work, we do single-family housing, multifamily housing, and community facilities. I love the community facilities program. I just think it's really provides some really cool things to small communities. So for instance, it can be as small as a grant to purchase a police car in a small town, to constructing a town hall, educational facilities, jails, anything that you can think of that a local government would need can fall under the community facilities program. It's a really awesome program. Granted, I have never worked in CF, which has always been my regret. But in the single family space, in the loan guarantee program where I work, you probably saw 2 weeks ago, it was on July the 22nd, we posted the final rule for our single close construction program. And this is kind of a revisit of the rule that we published in 2016 that created the program. A lot of lenders and realtors came back and said, we love the 2016 rule, but if you could do these couple more things, that would really be helpful. So the big things that you're going to see come out of the rule that we just published is the ability to have a slight bump in the interest rate during the construction period. We had some feedback from smaller lenders that said, it's really hard for us to do business if we can't be able to have a little bit higher rate during the construction period. And so we set that out at 200 basis points over the 30-year rate that you would quote the borrower. The other part is that we created a clearer path for rehabilitation loans. We've always had the ability to do purchase and repair loans, but that path that we gave you was pretty dark and murky. So what we did is we created a specific chapter in the handbook that says you can do rehabilitation loans. It's going to look a lot like a HUD 203K. What we wanted to do was not create a whole different process so that lenders or realtors had to learn two separate programs. So when you see that come out in the handbook, and I believe it's been posted in advanced copy out on our website, you're going to see it looks an awful lot like a HUD 203K. So the same rules, under $35,000, the property's habitable, no principal interest set aside, reserve account for that. Over $35,000, you can do a complete tear down to the foundation and rebuild. You can do a principal interest reserve account if the house is not habitable for up to 6 months or until the inspector deems the house to be habitable. So we're really excited about that. Some other things that you're going to see happen in the next year, well, into the end of the calendar year, I should say, is a restructure of how we deliver our services to you. So in the loan guarantee side, you're dealing with 47 different state offices, which is a customer dissatisfier because you're not getting consistent answers from our staff. What we're going to do is roll all of the loan processing and guarantee delivery to headquarters, where we're going to have a staff of around 200 folks that'll be 100% dedicated to that. And we are thinking that besides being able to provide a higher level of customer service, we're also going to see a little bit of administrative savings from that so that we're not repeating administrative resources 47 different times. And you'll see that happen by the end of the calendar year, so we're very excited about that. The other thing in that restructure is we're going to grow to the program that we are now. When we started off in 1991, we were a little teeny shop, and now we're able to guarantee up to $24 billion in loans each year, and we really haven't grown to match that ability to guarantee $24 billion. So for instance, right now we have one person who does servicing support, and in the new structure we'll have 8 or 9 folks that will be doing that. We'll also have a dedicated team for lender and partner activities, which we do not have now. So you'll see more training opportunities from us, you'll see more handouts, things like that, to be able to promote the program that we haven't been able to do before that time. And just a reminder that we do work horizontally with all sorts of government, our federal partners and agencies, but also local governments. So spread the word for us. We're out there trying to go around rural America to let them know, what we can do with our agency. But whatever you guys could do to help out, that would be great. Thanks a lot.
So we'll go from rural to LA. So the Assistant District Director, Economic Development for the Los Angeles District Office, SBA, Terri Billups. Nice to meet you.
Good morning, everyone. Desiree, thank you for your leadership and for putting together this event. I think it's an important dialogue that we all need to have. So, you know, due to your efforts, we're all in this room and we're gonna learn a lot and hopefully share a lot. So Desiree asked that I share with you some information about what SBA does in terms of government contracting and how we help you as women business leaders. Most of you probably qualify as small business leaders unless you have businesses that have over 500 employees. Anyone? Okay, great, then it means you're all small. My goal is to make sure you all grow beyond small business and kind of put me out of a job. I'm good with that, just so you know. And I also wanted to mention that everyone on this panel, we partner with. So SBA has federal partners, so we do partner with the USDA. And right now we have a rural initiative that's going to try, and we're really trying to get out of the cities and the urban areas and try to partner with the USDA and use our loan products in partnership with their loan products to really scale our urban, because we have programs here, but more importantly, our rural areas that often don't get as much attention. And then also with the FDIC, we have partnerships there as well. So we really do work in unison to bring to you programs and services to fulfill your needs. So on the government contracting side, you may be sitting there saying, okay, as a woman, what is my advantage? Does anyone in here know what your advantage is as a woman in government contracting?
Minority.
Okay, and the fact that as women, you have a program for women. So you can, if you get into federal contracting and you register, and there's a certification process, which I'm happy to report, we're trying to simplify, so that's in process. And we've always given you the ability to either self-certify as a woman so that you didn't have to pay anything, or you could pay a fee and go to a third party and have them certify you. I always tell women, like, you have the information, take the time, submit it on your own, it's free. And chances are, you know, your support team, they have all the information anyway, it's just really putting the effort in and making sure that you submit it. But the good news is it will get easier. And I think as government, we really are striving to make the task much more understandable, make it easier to scale. And often the feedback we get from small businesses, women and men alike, is it's too complicated. So what I always say, if it were easy, everyone would do it, right? So the fact that it is a little complicated, to me, is a differentiator. Because if you stick with it, educate yourself, the reality is the pool is smaller. You know, if it were so easy everyone did it, then that would mean you'd have more competition. The fact that it's a little challenging just means those who are resilient, and we know as women we're resilient, will be the ones that excel at it. So as women, the other advantage you have besides the women-owned small business program is when you look at SBA and the fact that all small businesses are supposed to get 23% of prime contracts of the dollars awarded to businesses out whenever we do contracting. But women have the only ability to be what we call in contracting unicorns. And a unicorn is someone that could fit in every criteria of government contracting. So the categories are small disadvantaged business, which is our 8A program, women-owned small businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned small business, and hub zones. Well, guess what, women? There's nothing in there that says men. So the fact that we have that little woman check mark, if you're a service-disabled vet, and we have a couple veterans in the room, we're the only ones that really, if you meet all those criteria, can fit into every category. That's an advantage. If you fit into just one, the woman-owned small business category, that in itself is an advantage because 5% of that 23% goal that I mentioned is supposed to be awarded to women-owned small businesses. So what does that mean? That means if there's a set-aside contract, you're only competing with other women that do what you do. So let's say you're in professional services. If the contract is set aside for women-owned small businesses, and the criteria is there only have to be 2, so when the contracting officer does research, if he can find 2 qualified small businesses that are owned by women, he can set aside that contract for women-owned businesses. So that means the pool of your competition, so I mentioned it's not easy. So for those of you who stuck with it and you're resilient and you're the only 2 companies hypothetically that do what you do, You're only competing with one other person. That's a beautiful thing. And even if it were, a different criteria, say small business, and you're competing with other small business, that shrinks the pool. But each one of those extra certifications you get, say for example, HubZone. HubZone is an acronym for Highly Underutilized Business Zone, and we love our acronyms in government. So again, you need to educate yourself. Know how to talk the talk. And that's one of the things I'm going to share with you when I close out is, what are the best practices? What advice can I give you? But understanding is probably one of the most important. So for a hub zone, if you have your business in a hub zone, and people are always surprised to find out some of the areas that are hub zones that they wouldn't expect to be hub zones. And I'm going to give you a little example. Our office is in Glendale. I don't know, are all of you or some of you familiar with Glendale, which is not far from Pasadena? For those of you not from here, it's literally about 6 miles west. And it looks like a pretty affluent area. Our office sits right on the main street, which is called Brand Boulevard. And lo and behold, if you looked around, you see lots of Maseratis and really nice cars. So you wouldn't think that that would be considered an underutilized area. Guess what? Part of it is, if you go about 1 street south of us and 1 block behind us to the east, it's a hub zone. So the way to find out is pretty simple. You just put in your address on the locator and see if you're in a hub zone. If you're a one-woman show and you live in a hub zone and your business is in a hub zone, you qualify as a hub zone. But you have to alert SBA and get certified. So we have to add the flag onto your, what do you call it? I guess it's your profile. There you go, thank you. With SBA, and then they'll flag it, and then guess what? Now you can compete for those hub zone set-aside contracts. So now you have the woman-owned, you have the small business, and now you have the hub zone. The caveat is, as you scale your business and grow, you're gonna have to have 35% of your employees also live in a hub zone. Doesn't have to be the same hub zone, but a hub zone. But here in LA, you'd be surprised if you just put in the information and see what areas actually qualify. It's pretty surprising. So when you look at all of our government contracting programs, I encourage you to do the woman-owned qualification, do the certification, do it on your own. The reality is that's one goal. We keep getting close every year to hitting. Like last year, I think we were at 4.7% in the woman-owned goal toward the 5% overall. So we're getting close. The challenge is each year we're doing better and better in our small business sourcing. So that 5% just keeps going up, which is a good thing. Yeah. So 5% of, I think, I'm going to look at my notes now to give you the exact number. But when you're looking at $120.8 billion, $120.8 billion with a B, that was sourced to small businesses and prime contracts, you can see why that number, that 5%, is a little bit elusive. But that's good for us because that just means it's a stretch goal. And as more and more of you get educated on how to do government contracting and get a good understanding if you're a good fit, then we buy everything pretty much. I don't think I found anything that we don't buy. It's just figuring out where you might fit. I encourage you to at least explore it if that's something that's of interest to you. So now I'm going to close out with what are the best practices or the advice I can give you. And we all know fundamentally when we first start learning, what do we learn? ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, right? So I put together some ABCs of what you need to learn if you expect to go into government contracting. So the A, learn how to analyze the market, understand what you do and where it fits into the government purchasing portfolio. Advocate for yourself. As women, that's something that we don't always do a good job of, is to be our own best advocate. Advocate for other women too, there's nothing wrong with that. Aspire. Aspire to be a government contractor who's gonna bring it every time. So when it comes to that past performance history, you're the best there is. And when I say the best, it's not only in delivery, it's in cost, it's in customer service. That's what we do. I mean, we excel pretty much at anything we set our minds to. It's just a matter of, putting the effort into it. Okay, so there's the A. The B. Be open. What does that mean? Be open to trying new things. Again, don't pigeonhole yourself. You know, if you're that professional service provider that I used as an example, look for another business that somehow complements what you do. Be open to joint ventures, to mentor protege. If you don't know of someone who is successful in government contracting, seek someone out. Learn from them. Ask them, like, what did you do right? What did you do wrong? People don't mind sharing, but sometimes it's the ask. So be bold. I mean, there's another B for you, be bold. Be the best educated. If you know what you do and you're the best at what you do, know the market, whenever you make that phone call to that contracting officer, tell them what they don't know. Solve their problem before they know what it is. Those are the keys to the door. Trust me, I've been in contracting, I know. Be aggressive. Again, this is something that, you know, sometimes we're told, don't be aggressive. Guess what? Be aggressive. Because I can tell you that the people who excel at this aren't afraid to ask the questions, to knock on the doors, and to be rejected. Because every time you get rejected, you learn something. And then the C, know how much capital you have available to you. Plan. We'll talk about access to capital later, but that's an important one. Nothing worse than getting the contract and finding out you don't have the capital to support it. Not good. Capacity. There's that other one that goes right along with capital. So it's not only financial capacity, it's physical capacity. Do you have the people? You know, if you get 2 contracts back to back, can you fulfill them? And then competition. Know who your competition is, differentiate yourself. Don't be afraid to say what you do and scream from the rooftops that you're the best at it. That's the advice I give you. The best practices are, don't be afraid to start small. Try a city contract, try a state contract, move up to a federal. If you're ready now, jump in with both feet with federal, but make sure that you talk to other people who've done it and know what you're signing when you sign that 400-page contract, because it can come back and hurt you. So just do your due diligence up front. And with that, I'm going to hand it off. Thank you.
Thank you. So I hope you have a lot of business cards, because I think they're going to be asking before that.
I have them on
afterwards.
the back table.
There we go.
I got lots of paper for you.
All right, there we go. And now Marina DeWit from Region 9 Advocate for the U.S. Small Business Administration Office of the Advocacy.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Desiree. This has been an amazing event. I've been here since Sunday, and I feel like I have really personally grown more than anything. So I appreciate the opportunity to learn and be inspired by these amazing women in this room. And so thank you to conversations and stories. I feel like I'm a brand new person than I was when I showed up here on Sunday afternoon. So mission accomplished, check mark. As you can tell, we work in the same agency because we do dress the same. We do our hair the same. It's a uniform. I got my red, white, and blue. So I work also for Small Business Administration, but we are independent of SBA, the Office of Advocacy, and this is where I come in. We have, our main office is in Washington, D.C., and we have 10 regions, so I'm a regional representative, so I cover California, Arizona, Nevada, Hawaii, Guam, American Samoa. And this is my region, this is why I'm here. I live in Phoenix, Arizona. Talked to many of you about our wonderful 116 degree weather. But I used to live here in California. I'm a refugee from California. And I do love coming and visit. This is kind of like my backyard too, so it's great to be here. The Office of Advocacy is very unique. We've been around since 76, but nobody really knows about our existence, but we do go hand in hand with SBA. What we do is we deal with federal regulations that impact small business, not city, not state, federal. So if you are in a company, you have your business, you're in an industry, and there's a federal regulation that is causing you a hassle, it's causing you gray hair, money, time, this is where you need to talk to me. I have some of the brochures in the back of the room, and I certainly have a lot of my business cards. I am your regional representative. So when you're coming up with an issue, if there's an issue in your business that is not letting you succeed because of a certain federal regulation, either a regulation is existing or a regulation is coming up, you need to tell me what it is. Because the only way these changes can be made is if you speak up. You are the experts. You're the experts in your field. You're the experts in your business, in your company. You know exactly what you're doing that is working and what does not work. And if it's a federal regulation that was made up here in DC, and it may work great for a large corporation, large company, but when it comes down to a small business, it doesn't work. I know sometimes it comes up to a matter of paying extra fees for a lawyer, which, you know, for a huge company, paying $1,000 fee, it's like, whatever. But when it comes to a small mom and pop shop, it doesn't work. It's too much money. I'm a small business owner myself. That's why I know what it's like to write a check. I know what it's like to start a company. It's not easy. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of weekend hours and soccer games on the computer. But some of the examples that I can give you to help you understand how exactly I connect to small business. I was in, I brought it up to a few people that I spoke here before. I think it's the best example. I was in Tulare, California in spring. There was a farm show, Ag Fest, World Ag Fest, which was phenomenal, great food. I'm very proud to say that at 9 a.m. I was drinking cowboy coffee with peach cobbler and vanilla ice cream, which was made right there. It was 9 a.m., but it was awesome. It was freezing cold, but it was very, very good. And, you know, a lot of agricultural issues were obviously coming up, but one that kind of hit home for me was a trucking industry. My parents owned a truck. My dad was a owner-operator of a truck. And the trucking industry and the trucking drivers were talking about the electronic logging device regulation that is being imposed, putting all these devices on trucks. So after 10 hours, your engine will shut down and you're forced to take a rest. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense because the Department of Transportation originally, you know, put it in place because of the fatigue. Fatigue in drivers causes accidents, so it's a safety precaution. So I'm like, I get it. I remember my dad driving long hours, being exhausted. I remember him saying how tired he was. You know, he's seen accidents happen. Luckily, he's never been in one, but I remember this. So I was like, that's a great, great way to ensure safety on our roads. But as I'm talking to these drivers, they're like, well, hold up. Two things. One, what if we have livestock? And we're driving through Arizona when it's 116 degrees. We can't just shut down the truck. What do we do with the cows or bees or perishable produce that are in our truck? We can't just stop and take a rest for 11 hours. It just won't work. Like, yeah. And then the second thing was when you get to loading dock, and I remember my dad saying this all the time, they say 2 hours in and out. Okay, well, someone is taking 4 hours. And you know what? These are the 4 hours that he cannot drive, and it's counted against his driving hours. So now instead of being on the road for 10 hours, he only has 6. So he is hauling, going real fast to get to his next destination because now he has time reduced. So the truckers are saying, hey, can we not have that trucking, the loading hours be deducted from our driving hours? It makes sense, right? So once this issue came up, I took crazy notes and then brought it to our lawyers in DC. I said, hey, do you guys know this is going on? They're like, yes, we've been very well aware. Glad you bring this up. We, within a couple of weeks, there was a comment period put out, so where other businesses could comment on this regulation coming up. What is good, what is bad. There's no way that a small company could hire another person to have 2 drivers drive, right? I mean, it's costing too much money. Like if it's a mom and pop shop, like my parents, they couldn't afford another driver. So there was a comment period put in, and then once all this information was collected, the most important question I always ask when I go to chambers of commerce and forums, when I talk to small businesses, is what's your solution? How do you propose to solve this problem? You are working this field. You know exactly what the solution would be. You know what would help. Very important question that our agency asks. And with that information, we were able to write a proposal to the Department of Transportation to amend the regulation or to change it when it comes to livestock, when it comes to agriculture, to make sure that these drivers that are providing our food are not being penalized and not subjecting to risk the animals that they're transporting or perishable produce. So that's kind of an example. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, but there's no way we would know about this. We're thinking great safety, right? But when it comes to small business, the only way that we know that something needs to have a change is if you come and tell us this information. So these comments don't need to go directly to me. We have a website. Everything's on our website. It's advocacy.sba.gov. So you can actually put these comments in there, and it goes directly to our industry-specific lawyers or economists or me, so I can, you can invite me to come to your business. I would love to see what you do and how you do it, to get the details of it. And the second most important thing that our agency does is we provide economic research. There was a lot of data presented in the last couple of days, and it's been phenomenal. We also do data on small businesses. So as the definition, the federal definition is 500 people or less in the company. None of us have that. It's a pretty big company, right? So we do have that information available on our website. It goes state-specific. We can also do it by congressional district. I talk to a lot of congressional representatives in the states that are in my region, so I tell them about what we do and how we do this, and they use our data when they do their presentations and when they do come out and talk to population. So please take advantage of me. Take advantage of the information that we provide. Please let me know if there's something going on that maybe, in this industry you deal with so many people, with so many businesses, with so many families. You may hear a story here and there. Use me as your contact, use me as your venue in a way to connect me with people that may need help with federal regulations that are impacting their lives, impacting their business. And I think I can move on.
Great, thank you. And Terri, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Marina is an exceptional resource, and I send problems to her sometimes. I don't know if she knows they come from me, but very often whenever one of you is experiencing a problem, you reach out to SBA through the district office, which is where I am, and ultimately they end up with Marina. So you are so lucky to have such a good advocate that really is interested in making sure you're successful in removing barriers. So when she says please use her, she really means that, and she does a phenomenal job. So I just wanted to let all of you know that firsthand, I've had to send folks to her, and it's kind of tough to sit in her seat when people are coming to you when they have problems all the time. So please, if you could let her do some fun stuff, like come out and see all the wonderful things you do, please reach out to her.
Thank you, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And a lot of times I show up in a room and I go to a lot of chambers of commerce and from the smallest ones to the biggest ones. Like, I just want to make sure people know we exist, because a lot of businesses don't know Office of Advocacy is on another planet. Sometimes the issue comes up and people are telling me this and they're asking my advice. I'm like, I need to Google search this. I don't know every single thing out there. I'm not an expert in any particular area. I'm not. I'm a former teacher. I can tell you things about kids. That's my degrees are in education and in psychology. But there's a lot of things that I learn in I've been only doing this job for a year. So kind of things lined up, doors opened, as we've been talking about here a lot, and I kind of walked into the door and I've been learning on the spot. So a lot of times a situation comes up or an issue comes up in business, I honestly don't know anything about it unless you tell me what it is. I become a Google expert. And then I reach out to our lawyers who are definitely experts in the issue, who can explain it to me, and then I can say, okay, whoa, this is actually something serious that we need to look at. I have a great relationship with other regional advocates that are in the United States. There's 12 of us together, 10 regionals, and we have 2 national. We work together, we have an amazing team. I'm very proud to be part of this team, because if I come up with something here in California, I compare notes on what's going on in the Midwest, what's going on in the East Coast. Like, are we hearing the same problem? Is this the same situation, or is it really region specific? And it's interesting, it's exciting. This job is not boring, and I love it. So please, like, if you hear things, you know stuff, let me know, because I love to learn. Thanks.
Yeah, and it's free.
That's true. That's true. That's true. Taxpayer money, you already paid for it. So all these resources that we're offering through SBA and Office of Advocacy, it is free to you.
Thank you. I like that. You already paid for it,
Yeah.
right? Nothing's really free. You already paid for it. So I'll also speak. So it's kind of, I find myself, what is the Interagency Council on Homelessness doing in this particular panel? And I think the theme that we're going to hear is about interconnectedness and the interjurisdictional, whether it's within the federal government or between the federal government and other agencies, between nonprofits, between business owners. And I'll have a lot more to talk about this afternoon about the state of homelessness and what's happening in the afternoon panel. But, and I did have a couple of slides because I do think the visuals really help. So should I just press the button and, or are you gonna? Nope, not that one. So, and as that goes, so have you ever heard of USICH before?
No.
See, exactly, right? So I'm going to explain what that is. I mean, you've heard Small Business Associate, the USDA, you've heard of that. Basically, the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness is the federal interagency that works on ending homelessness in America. And the way I like to describe it is the council comprises of the 19 different federal departments that somehow deal with the issue of homelessness. And the Interagency Council is the hub of that 19-spoke wheel to keep things moving. And so there's the main office in Washington, D.C., there we go, here we go. So I like the, there we go, okay. So the council comprises of one member of each of the 19 different agencies. So you think like HUD or HHS or the VA is obvious, but USDA is there, the General Services Administration, the Department of Labor, Department of Justice, the White House, so a whole variety of federal agencies are there. The council meets quarterly in DC. There's a policy group that looks at different issues. And then we have a policy team, as I mentioned, in DC, and then I'm one of 5 members of the National Initiatives team who work as regional coordinators in the certain areas to connect what's going on in DC with the reality of what's happening in local communities. And so what I think is very important is to understand what's happening in local communities related to homelessness and relay that back up to DC. So yeah, we can have, and I call our region sort of the House of Representatives kind of version. I only have 2 of 50 states, California and Arizona, but I probably represent about the same number of people experiencing homelessness than my colleague Bob, who has about 17 states in his area. So we all share ideas, we share best practices, and then when policies and issues come up on a national level, we can disseminate that out. So for this particular panel, well, let me just say, and we have what we call our federal strategic plan to end homelessness called Home Together. And this was put together and released last summer, a little over a year ago. So each of the 19 different agencies need to go through it and clear it, and it went through a clearance process. So this is basically the guidelines of how we are going to work on what we're saying is basically to end homelessness, you need a home. And that the government is not the only one that can do it. We all need to work together to make it happen. Every layer of government, also the private sector, business communities, faith-based groups, community activists, all along is going to help make something happen. And the idea behind the plan itself is that what we want to make sure that homelessness is a rare, brief, and one-time experience. And so the plan goes into detail about what does that mean, how do you define it, what are the criteria and benchmarks that are happening. So again, why am I on this particular panel? One of the big issues dealing with homelessness is dealing with different demographics, and we heard about challenges happening with veterans after they are return home. And as mentioned, there's that window of opportunity for helping them to be successful, but a lot of times veterans fall into homelessness for one reason or another, or people with disabilities. Basically, homelessness, as we all know, it could happen to anybody. One thing could happen and the spiraling effect that just brings people down, and they don't have that social safety net, they don't have that connection with family or friends or other organizations, then things can turn to the worst, and especially in areas where, in California and others, where the cost of living has gone up dramatically, rents have gone up dramatically, you get injured on the job, you lose your job, you have a domestic violence situation, something happens, there's mental health concerns, a variety of things. And so we have to look at what this means in our country. But the area for this particular panel, and again, I'll go into more detail on homelessness later this afternoon, but we're looking at certain strategies of how we can look at big picture items in an interdisciplinary way in terms of combating homelessness for everyone. And as you can see up on the screen, obviously affordable housing are pieces of it, and preventing and diverting homelessness from happening in the first place. But for one particular area that really hasn't been discussed until more recently that we're focusing on at USICH is helping people who exit homelessness to find career success and economic mobility. So how do you figure out where the gaps are, and how do you connect people who have skills? And if you talk to people who have experienced homelessness, their stories are incredible. And where they were before that they found themselves without shelter, they are like any one of us could have been. The stories are they're pretty incredible. This is a chapter in people's lives. It's not their life themselves, right? They had a prologue, and hopefully the next chapters moving forward will be something that's helpful to them in their quality of life, and obviously of that in their communities. So a big piece of that is not only, of course, the housing component to it, but the sustainability of that. And for many people, that does mean how can they find a place that they can have economic security and economic mobility. So with that, there's a new interagency working group on employment, and it's a way for the USICH is connecting directly first with the Department of Labor and the VA. I've gotten feedback saying Department of Commerce should be on there. There should be maybe DOJ on there, because you look at what are the gaps that are happening that we see among people who are experiencing homelessness, that if they're exiting out of it, or if they can find their way into something more sustainable, where are the barriers as it relates to employment? Is it related to a number of different criminal justice issues that have occurred by virtue of not having shelter and getting constant connections with law enforcement and not in a positive way? How do you turn that around? What are the things that are opportunities or trainings and opportunities that can happen? Obviously, shelter and housing is a component of it. If you don't know where you're going to sleep at night, how do you know how you can get to and from work in the morning? So figuring out those data and knowledge gaps of where those gaps are within the federal government and different agencies. So I'm thrilled to meet each of you, and I definitely want all of your cards and to figure out how we can work together. And I'm going to be in Phoenix later this month, so in 110-degree heat. So excited. 16 today, fantastic. So finding out those gaps, strengthening that coordination. There are so many different organizations that work tirelessly on helping people who are homeless to get into housing, into services, and they don't all necessarily know how they're all interconnected with each other. How do we strengthen those connections? How do we increase access to employment services? How do we make sure that that access doesn't have a racial inequity component to it? That is another, and certainly with women as well. We talked a lot about whether it's certain types of industry or opportunities. Where can we really make sure that everyone knows where those access points are and how to achieve them? But really, I think the exciting thing that I hope this interagency working group is going to dive into, it just started about a little less than a year ago, is working with the community and finding some innovation, some pilot projects that maybe small businesses would like to try. Here's an opportunity where there might be grant opportunities in the future about spurring employment or innovative activities that would help people not only gain employment but be successful in it. What do those things mean? How can local businesses and local community organizations come together and spur that activity in pilot projects and things like that? So that was really the question that I wanted to ask as part of all of this, and I think the question here that we can talk about as a whole panel is how can USICH, or really all of us, partner with you in trying to spur this connection to employment opportunities, not only for your own organizations, but also for people in our own communities who have the ability to, with the right connections and with the right support, add to that community and add to the employment sector in our country. And finally, every single PowerPoint that I do, I end with this slide, or this is my main slide, so you'll see it later on, but I bring this up because it just brings up a lot of things that we talk about when we talk about a challenging issue, and homelessness is certainly one of them. That what are the ingredients for success? And first is political will. And political will can mean within elected government, doesn't have to be, right? Each one of us has a position of authority and a position of influence in our role, and how can we utilize that position to move things forward in a positive direction and to keep that sustainable even when you know it's the right thing to do, but it may not be a popular thing to accomplish in your area. citing a shelter, for example, in certain areas, creates, obviously some concern amongst some, and how do you educate and make sure that this is a certain positive thing that we can do and bring the community along with you. An effective use of adequate resources. There's never enough money for everything, but we need, and you certainly need adequate resources to move things forward. But it's not just having the funds, it's effectively using them to the best of your ability. How do you maximize that funding? How do you leverage it into other sources of opportunity? Having a collaborative approach. So allowing each of us in our role to do what we do best and allowing everyone else to do what they do best. That sometimes, it sounds easy, it's extremely difficult, especially when there's vested interests happening, when there's certain expertise and misunderstandings between different organizations. How do we allow and trust that the community as a whole and everyone who comes to the table to work on a project can put their best face forward, meet their full potential, and leverage everything else and connect with everyone else on a common goal. And then finally, a never give up attitude. Homelessness, if you know people or have been experienced seeing individuals, in Santa Barbara is where I live, and when I was involved in local government there, when something is successful, it becomes invisible. What you see in terms of someone who might be experiencing homelessness in a street area or panhandling, or someone who's chronically homeless, you have a vision of that person in that moment of time. That person had a life before that moment, and you work with that person again, obviously, to help them achieve a better outcome for themselves as well. But when that happens, that work that happens constantly, and they finally get housing and supportive services, you forget and you don't see them anymore. And so success is invisible. We have to tell those stories, I think, a little more in order to show how much work goes into themselves and the community around to make success happen. But it does take a lot of perseverance and integrity and consistency and that never give up attitude. So so you'll see me talk about that in a little while later, but I do think that's something that we can talk about together in reaching our full potential. That's how you get a hold of me. I do have a bunch of business cards as well for a little later, and I'll be around a little later, but why don't we now get to some questions, and off we go. Do you want to say anything before you go?
I can be reached at sschwartz@fdic.gov, and I really enjoyed the day and a half here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we didn't take the full hour. We do have some time for questions, and if you'd like to, we're closing in on time there.
Thank you for all the information. I'm really excited to hear that USDA will have the 203K program for rehabilitation and restabilization. It's so important and exciting for me to live in the valley that we have Glendale on this investigation.
I have a question about homelessness. So my name's Stephanie Southwick, and I live in Seattle, and I experience in one of my businesses where we pick up needles in our yard, right outside our front door, where my company works, and my employees have to step over that. And sometimes, one time I was there was a woman in the bushes next door, like, doing something. So it's all over, but you didn't mention addiction and opioids, and I just wonder what are you guys doing about that?
Sure.
Where does that fit in?
And like I said, there's a whole panel on homelessness and poverty and affordable housing, and so I didn't want to repeat myself for there. So
okay.
That'll happen this afternoon, but I can certainly
Perfect.
connect with you on opioid addiction. Okay. And I will connect you with my counterpart who lives in Seattle as well.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thanks.
So I wanted to connect real quick, Terri, about the fact that you have, from a small business perspective, people don't realize that you have a $1.5 billion Army contract that you've been working on overseas. How you worked in that, if you could explain that real quick. People need to see the scale. When SBA is so small, don't think small dollars.
Yeah, so do you mean historically, like my experience? So,
I have a big voice, usually it's not a problem. But I, in my past, worked for the Army Contracting Command. So for those 2 veterans we had in the room, I haven't served directly, but as a civilian employee I have, so I know the importance of serving warfighters. And what Desiree alluded to is I worked for the Army Contracting Command, but I worked for foreign military cells. And I'll be quite frank, I came from private industry. I had no idea that the government even sold anything to foreign countries. What I found out is not only do we sell things, but we sell big things like tanks. So I worked on the Abrams tank program. So literally, my program was with Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So it was a $1.5 billion program to convert their tanks. So we had M1A2 tanks that we were converting to M1A2S tanks. And then we were also building a tank plant within Saudi Arabia, which for their government was a jobs program. So they were trying to create a mechanism to create jobs for their people. So we do have huge contracts, and when you say 1.5 billion, that number is so large that it's hard to wrap your head around. But in addition to what we do here domestically, we have so much opportunity for companies that can scale and do things outside our country. And one of the things that most people who are small businesses don't recognize is even though what you're doing may not be something that you would consider an export, but if you're doing one little part of the service or one little part of the manufacturing of a part, and that downstream ends up going into something that goes outside the country, that's considered an export. So it really requires that you go back and evaluate what you do and how as a small business you might be not understanding the scale and scope of what you do and the ultimate impact of where that product goes or that service goes. So I always encourage small businesses to go back and sort of evaluate, like, where does the end product of what I do end up? And most people never think in those terms. You just do what you do, right? You get up every day, you give it your best, and you just make it happen. But I encourage you to go back and look at that. And the other thing that I didn't mention, I mentioned that I came from private industry, but I worked in supplier diversity as well. So the other thing is really understand how to function not only in federal, state, local contracting space, but to also understand how to diversify your revenue streams. And I will tell you the reason I'm no longer in private industry is because when the economy imploded in 2008, I worked for Chrysler, and I decided that I wanted to get off the Titanic because I, at that point, thought it was sinking. And the other part of it is they had told me that if I chose to stay with the company, I either had to find a job that I wanted somewhere within the company, or they would put me where they thought I could really do the best. And they had alluded they were going to put me in financial risk. And what that meant is the small businesses that I helped grow, I would be knocking on the doors and saying, we need our tooling, we need our parts, and shutter them. So not only did it go against what I felt personally, but it felt what I felt professionally. I didn't think I could do that. And I could have gone into some other part of the company, but it was at the point in my career that I think someone earlier, it might have been Chris, said, sometimes you know that it's just time to go try something new, go do something that you have a passion for. And my passion is really helping, not hurting small businesses. So as women, as leaders, really look around you and figure out you have a passion for what you do, but how do you take that passion and not only help yourself to be as diversified as you can in your revenue stream, but also the ripple effect of economic growth and vitality, and this relates back to the homelessness. And I was sitting here as Helene was presenting, thinking, when I look at the number of small businesses we have in Los Angeles, and if I filter that down and look at the number of women-owned small businesses we have, if every woman-owned small business hired one homeless person, we could solve the homelessness epidemic in LA. That's pretty incredible. So just be here and just, I always say I like to plant seeds, just think about it. Like if you could just do one thing, or maybe work with someone else that you know that maybe has a business that they might be able to do that if you can't. It's really how we at a grassroots level really start to look around us and see how do we really make a difference. And I'm completely confident that the people in this room can accomplish wonderful things individually, but together, if we hold hands and partner, what we can do is unmeasurable in terms of impact. So I encourage you all to do that.
First of all, I wanted to thank this panel. I thought that this was so informative. I feel like you guys are on the front lines, but you're kind of behind the curtain, because I felt like I learned so much about what type of services you have. So thank you so much for that, and thank you for coming today and bringing all this knowledge and invigorating us. I do want to say to the audience, and I know Mr. Schwartz had to leave, but I did have a chance to work with the FDIC as a contractor for a minute about 10 years ago, and he means what he says. They are engaging with local real estate, and I'm sure I'm the only appraiser in here, but they do also engage with local real estate agents, and so go to their website. They are a joy to work for, and before Fannie Mae scooped me up, I had actually applied to work for them. That's how impressed I was with the 4-week stint that I did as just a consultant. So thanks again for your time and for your expressions. We really appreciate it.
So from the USDA side, when you think about it, from the business aspect you have, the home ownership piece, if you think about it, we purposely put this up from a consumer standpoint and from a business standpoint, is why the integration all the way across, because Helene's been the mayor of Santa Barbara for 8 years. Her delivery, understanding business, understanding the ecosystem within the community of Santa Barbara is why the connection, because as great as relationship you two have, not everyone knows that and understands the advocacy. I mean, here you've been in existence since '76. The integration of how we can connect the dots. And we have Fannie, we have Freddie. They're your best advocate in that aspect. We have the CEO of Exit International here. They have a huge department in the rural area and on the East Coast. That is what we need to see and hear. And so I wanted to highlight each of the different scenarios, what you've done. And Michelle, you're being groomed to be taking over there at the USDA and all the different aspects. So you are.
It's all part of my world domination plan.
So I was like, well, I want. They said, Michelle's being groomed. I'm like, okay. But the idea is that, as you heard me talk about Freddie and the multifamilies, we need to know more about you in a bigger depth. So thank you for that question. The way you can partner with NAWRB is really about getting the information that you have into our, give it to us so we can include it in the WARE, so we can get it out there, because I have brought the the SBA advocacy out multiple times to our conference, and still to this day, people are just like, and it's really about keeping the sustainability, because we haven't addressed, or we haven't passed, how many businesses are lost because they operate out of home, the brick and mortar, right? So they're in the crisis. And so we're going through that cycle again, where we're having issues we need to address. And if we can all connect, and I love, Terri, your comment about if every one of these women-owned, it doesn't have to be women-owned, it can be any business owner, small business, should take one person to offer them help on the street, saying, I can help you doing this, and then do it and continue doing it, be responsible. And as we heard Erica talk all the time, talk about the fact of understanding the person, understanding the veteran. Same applies to the homeless. We have to understand where they came from, what their scope of their deals is, and we can succeed. So thank you very much.
And with that, I think happen to anybody. One thing could happen and the spiraling effect that just brings people down, and if they don't have that social safety